Stay tuned to the end of the episode for an important update.
Hello, this is Dennis from Melbourne, Australia. I play at Long Island Golf Club here in Melbourne, and welcome to Golf Smarter 981.
I think another way to understand mindfulness, especially with respect to sports, is a soft openness. You don't want to be focused tightly on any particular thing because then you're oblivious to everything else around it. So let me give a different sport as an example. I'm on horseback and I'm racing through the woods. If I say to myself, watch out for the branches so I don't get knocked off the horse. So I'm vigilant. I'm focusing on those branches. Now, as I ride through the woods, I may stumble over a boulder because I was not paying attention to anything but the branches. So mindfulness is different from vigilance. When you're vigilant, you have a particular stimulus in mind. When you're mindful, you're just there.
A mindful golfer needs a mindful body, as explained by the mother of mindfulness, Dr. Ellen Langer.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome to the Golf Smarter podcast, Ellen.
Hi, Fred. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. You know, Golf Smarter, clearly, now that we're in our 20th year of doing this podcast, the intention always was about mindfulness in golf. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've always felt that if you understand strategy and you understand how to control your emotions on the golf course, you can be a better player than just working on your swing mechanics. And right. a lot of golf instructors have agreed with that. And as someone who's more of a student than an instructor, I'm not an instructor. I'm here to learn from everybody. I'm really excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
So your work in mindfulness goes back decades. And I'm just curious how it ended up with golf.
Because people like you have called me. You know, that you can do anything you're doing, playing golf, eating a sandwich, doing a podcast, mindfully or mindlessly. And the consequences of doing it mindfully as opposed to mindlessly are enormous. And so it's relevant to virtually everything. There are things about golf, you know, I use it as an example when I'm teaching often because when students or, you know, anybody doesn't successfully complete whatever they're trying to do, they often become frustrated. And so I raise the simple question of, if you got a hole in one every time you swung the club, would that be fun? And just think about it for a second. People would realize, well, there's no game anymore. So that when you recognize you can either do things perfectly mindlessly, or imperfectly mindlessly, I think then you go a little easier on yourself. It's also, you know, that I've done some writing and a lot of talking about all sorts of sports, not just golf. And the thing that people don't realize is there are two general aspects to what you need to do. One is off the course. The other is on the course. You know, so that if you didn't sleep well, if you had a fight with your spouse, all of those things are going to clearly affect your golf. And learning what mindfulness is all about will help you enormously off the court. And then, of course, and then on the course, there are particular things one should be doing. You know, with any sport, people tend to think they should do it over and over and over again until they can do it perfectly and make it second nature. And whenever you hear yourself saying anything about second nature, recognize that means you're being mindless. And so I was on this television show decades ago with Tiger Woods' father. And so when he was asked, how did Tiger Woods get so good, that his father said, practice, practice, practice. And then I get on and I say, well, you know, practice often makes imperfect, not perfect. If you're practicing to achieve the end of not having to think about what you're doing, you're going to lock yourself in and not be as good as you can be. If when you practice, your intention is each time to notice subtle differences in what you're doing, the outcome, and so on, then the practice will help. But sadly, when most of us are taught sports, instruments, how to study for a test, that what people think they should do is repeat it as is, so that they don't have to think about it. And also, why would you want to do anything if you don't show up for it? I gave a talk the other day, then something occurred to me that after doing this for so long, it surprised me that it took so long for me to come to this, but it was a talk on happiness. And what I realized was that, can robots be happy? And of course not. Well, when we're being mindless, we're no different from robots. So the answer to improved game, the answer to improved health and increased happiness is to be mindful. Now, you should now, Fred, ask me the question. So what do you mean by mindfulness? Right.
Actually, I just wrote that down.
Okay, good.
That was my next question.
Right.
So
when people think of mindfulness, too often they just think of meditation.
Right.
And meditation is not mindfulness. Meditation is a practice you undergo in order to result in post-meditative mindfulness. Mindfulness, as we study it, is very different. It's not a practice. Essentially, it's a way of being that follows almost directly from the realization that uncertainty is the rule, not the exception. Everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives, so you can't know. Now, parents, teachers, golf instructors tend to speak in absolutes, hold the club this way, do X, Y, or Z, and that's fine in certain circumstances, but not in others. So one of the things, the way I try to bring this home to people is the one thing I think everybody thinks they know is how much is 1 + 1. So Fred, how much is 1 + 1?
2.
No, not always. If you add one pile of laundry plus one pile of laundry, 1 + 1 is 1. You add one cloud plus one cloud, 1 + 1 is 1. The other day, somebody sent me something where if you have one pizza and you add one pizza, you have two pizzas. However, if you have one lasagna and you add one lasagna, 1 + 1 is 1. It's just a bigger lasagna. All right. Now, beyond that, when you add 1 + 1 to get 2, you're using a base 10 number system. If you were using a base 2 number, no, you don't really have to understand anything deep about this, but if you were using a base 2 number system, 1 + 1 would be written as 10. And what I'm fond of saying now is the next time somebody asks you how much is 1 + 1, you're going to know it depends. And now you have choices. When you're mindful, you have choices. When you're mindless, you don't. Again, you're responding more like a robot. So, you could say 1, 10, 2, and probably other things as well. All right. So what I found over decades now, 45 years of research, sadly, is that virtually all of us are mindless almost all the time. We're not there. But when you're not there to know you're not there. But it's clear to me that this is sadly true. And the way to be there is very simple. So let's say you are going to visit me at my house right now. I'm in Dartmouth, Mass. You'd walk in. You wouldn't have to practice anything. You've never been here before. So you would notice things. Right? You might notice a painting and wonder if I did it. In some books, you see some things that seem strange to you. So you would be being mindful. Right? So when you're mindful, you're actively noticing new things. Now, when you think you know, so when I asked you how much was 1 + 1, you didn't do anything but just mindlessly answer 2. And now, knowing that things change, you take a little more time with it, only a few seconds more, and have a choice in what you're doing. So all of this research has shown me that by increasing our mindfulness, which means essentially becoming more and more aware that we just don't know, we don't have to feel bad about not knowing. Nobody knows because things are always changing. That when we increase this active noticing, the neurons are firing, and it's literally and figuratively enlivening. In very early research, we make elderly people more mindful, they live longer. Everything is better. We have people performing symphonies where they're mindless or mindful, record the piece, play it back for people who know nothing about the study. Everybody, not everybody, but over 90% of the people prefer the mindfully played piece. But I'll go back to what I said to you before, which is if you're going to be there, show up for it. And especially when we're talking about a sport that you're doing basically as recreation. I don't think either of us right now are speaking to the Tiger Woods of the world. And so if you're not going to play golf mindfully, why be there?
Now I'm going to be careful every time you ask me a question. You already nailed me twice here. So on the golf course, when we're talking about mindfulness and being aware of what?
Well, several things. So when you hold that golf club, if you hold it exactly the way you did the last time, you're not taking advantage of the way your body has changed. So that let's say you slept a little funny and your right shoulder hurts a tiny bit, but you're aware of it, then you should change the way you're standing, the way you're swinging, and so on. If you've played the course many times before, you may attempt to play it the same way you had the last few times, but now you're different. The weather is different. The course is different because even if they've just mowed it, the last time you played it probably wasn't exactly the same. So you want to be present and notice these subtle differences. I think that, and then the game will, of course, be more fun. And when you hit that golf ball and it's not a perfect shot, so what? That if it were perfect again each time, there'd be no game there. A way I explain this to people also is, I remember you're a little kid and you get in an elevator and you try to press that button, you can't reach it. And then a parent or some adult picks you up and you press the button. And then the next time you're a little older, you still can't. Eventually you're in the elevator, you press the button and you can reach it. That's the end, right? When was the last time you were excited about pressing a button in an elevator? All right. So, that's another example of how we should not be so frustrated with imperfection. And when you miss a shot, there's more stroke. There's more information there than if you hit it correctly. You hit it correctly, you don't know, were you just lucky? Right. Were you aware of why you did what you did? But if you screw up in some way, there's lots to pay attention to. And that when you've screwed up and you're now going to try to improve the next stroke, you can't be sure why you screwed up, but it doesn't matter. You can still make corrections. So I'm not really a golfer. I'm a tennis player. And so I hit the ball, and let's say that it's not a good, it wasn't fine performance. Now, if I say to myself, remember to bend your legs, even if that bad stroke had nothing to do with whether or not my legs were bent, I'm still going to set myself up to be better. And it's the same for all sports.
Sure. And you kind of dropped the word in there in the last part of our conversation where you said intention. And where does that fall?
Okay, well, that's interesting. That when I say be there for the event, when you're mindful, you are doing everything intentionally. When you're a robot, the past is determining what your present performance is going to be. But I think, and I think another way to understand mindfulness, especially with respect to sports, is a soft openness. That you don't want to be focused tightly on any particular thing. because then you're oblivious to everything else around it. So let me give a different sport as an example. I'm on horseback and I'm racing through the woods. If I say to myself, watch out for the branches, so I don't get knocked off the horse. So I'm vigilant. I'm focusing on those branches. Now, as I ride through the woods, I may stumble over a boulder because I was not paying attention to anything but the branches. So mindfulness is different from vigilance. When you're vigilant, you have a particular stimulus in mind. When you're mindful, you're just, there in some sense.
You've been doing this work for so many years, for decades.
Since I was 5.
Since you were 5. It's actually when I started the podcast, when I was 5. And you've earned the name of the mother of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Meaning, I'm inferring that you were the first one to start talking about mindfulness.
Yeah, pretty much so.
What brought you to that point?
Well, it's a funny story, actually. Before I moved up to Cambridge to teach at Harvard, this was in, 1977, I had the stereotype that everybody in Cambridge was super smart, as if they were all at Harvard and as if everybody at Harvard was smart. And I was coming from New York, where lots of people are street smart. And I would notice things that in New York, they just never happen. How could these smart people do these things? So this was a time where banks closed at 3:00 and there were no cash machines. Okay, so here you have parking at the bank. Now, at 3:00, the bank isn't open, so it's okay to park there. In New York, at 3:01, the spaces would be gone. But in Cambridge, they were just open. It was, silly things of this sort that said to me, this was something that was different from intelligence. And as I'm fond of saying, my first work in all this was studying mindlessness. And then somebody, and I keep trying to remember who it was, but I can't, I don't remember, said, you are what you study, or something mean of that sort. So then I said, okay, and I turned it around and started studying mindfulness. And it was at that time that I became more aware of Buddhism and the Eastern use of the term. And it was actually very exciting that through this Western scientific perspective, I was coming to many of the same conclusions as the Eastern work would suggest. But again, most of that is based on meditation. And even though I studied meditation at the beginning, and it's great practice, it's just different. The work that I do is mindfulness without meditation, just active noticing. Yeah. When you're active, it's very nice. People say, be in the present. It's meaningless because when you're not there, you don't know you're not there. So how can you call up the instruction? But when you know you don't know, then you're naturally there to find out. And when you're noticing new things, that puts you in the present, which I agree is a good place to be. So it's easy to get there, but not get there by just deciding, I'm going to be in the present. Yeah.
So I guess in the 70s, that time was ripe for that. But being in an academic environment, especially one like Harvard, did you get pushback from this concept?
Not really. I started studying it at the Graduate Center, City University of New York, when I was there for a few years after I got my PhD. And at that time, it was mindlessness, so there was no pushback. When I went up to Harvard, I was doing a meditation study, and this was massive. I was doing it with Skip Alexander when he was alive. He brought me into the study. And basically, it was they believed that if you have people all over the world or meditating, that would result in peace. So meditators over there are going to influence people over here to be less aggressive. I said, okay, fine. I'm in. Why not? I was pleased with myself, Fred, because this was the first time I was involved in something where if it worked, wouldn't, give me any applause. It was theirs. But what happened was at one point, so we were all over the Middle East, and a research assistant to a research assistant to a researcher, did something that they shouldn't do. I don't remember what it was. It was minor, but that came back to me, and I said, "All right, this is, it's too complicated. I can't. How can I have control over all of this?" So I slowly backed out. When you ask about pushback, I don't read my own reviews. I don't look at my own TV shows or podcasts. That way I can remain a legend in my own mind. So there could be pushback out there. There probably is, but
yeah,
I'm
a legend in my own room.
Right.
And a rumor in my own mind.
Right.
How much of this came after the summer of love? I mean, we're talking mid-70s here, and I remember that time, and the peace, love, everybody. Then the meditation was starting to happen. The people were looking into Buddhism and all that. Was there anything about the timing of that?
No, I don't think so. Because Remember, I was studying mindlessness.
Right.
And
which was pretty much what the summer of love was.
Yeah, well, maybe, but it wasn't appreciated that way at the time.
Yeah. So what are the components of mindfulness
I
that,
don't
again,
think
can be used by golfers?
Well, it's not a matter of components. Mindfulness is the process of noticing.
Okay.
And so you're going to notice when you don't know, right? And you're in a situation, you're naturally going to sit up and take notice. In addition to that, so that's top down. If you know you don't know, and how ubiquitous uncertainty is, then you naturally tune in. When you think you know, and then all you need to do is notice 3 or 4 new things about this thing you think you know, and you come to see you didn't know it as well as you thought you did, so your attention naturally goes to it. I mean, you can do that, with your spouse or friend. Notice 3 new things about them. There are always new things. And then that's exciting. This act of noticing is the essence of enjoyment. It's the essence of engagement. So we have a study we ran a long time ago where we'd have people they'd be listening to classical music, listening to loud music, I don't remember which kind, looking at paintings, watching football, all sorts of activities in one of 3 ways. Either we would tell them just do it, so they're just watching the football. These are women who hate football. Notice 2 new things about it. Notice 4 new things about it. Notice 6 new things. And it turns out the more you notice, the more you like the thing you're noticing. So anybody can enjoy golf. Anybody can enjoy anything by just doing this act of noticing. And too many of us, wait for something to grab us rather than actively grab it. So we don't have nuggets of mindfulness or it's all just this process of noticing. One of the important ways I think that people can be more effective and happy in whatever they're doing is to reduce the stress they experience. And stress is mindless. And whether you're on the golf course or you're at a cocktail party, the stress is not doing you a good service. So I just say to people quickly, just ask yourself, is it a tragedy or an inconvenience? Because almost never, I missed, I hit the ball in the sand, so what? It's not a tragedy. And so you recover more quickly. But stress is mindless because stress is the view that something's going to happen. And when it happens, it's going to be terrible. Now, it turns out that we can't predict what's going to happen. So if you just said to yourself, give yourself 3 reasons why this thing probably won't happen. So you went from thinking it's definitely going to happen. You're going to miss the shot. You're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to get fired from work, whatever it is. 3 or 4 reasons why it's not going to happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But now's the fun part. Turn it around and let's say it does happen. How is that actually an advantage? People don't realize events themselves are neither good nor bad. It's our views of the events that make them good or bad. Now, the more mindful you are, the more choices you have for how to view situations. And if some of these views feel better, clearly those are the ones you're going to gravitate to. But when you think X is awful, and you're about to experience it, you're setting yourself up. It's interesting. I think it was Mark Twain who said, most of the things we worry about never happen, which is also true. So if you just thought about the last 3 times you were stressed, and did the event happen? Chances are not. But even if it did, then you see you got through it. So it all becomes less scary. And so once we're not, and people in this world, I think, or at least in this country, believe that life is stressful. I don't think so. I don't think it has to be, but certainly everybody, if they employ the sorts of things that I talk about in the Mindful Body, can reduce the amount of stress that they're experiencing.
Amazing. Definitely need to thank Carl Morris for introducing us. This is a remarkable conversation. Your first book came out in the 80s?
Probably.
Or is it in the 70s?
Well, no, I wrote a book when I was in graduate school, but
okay.
the book you're referring to is Mindfulness.
Correct.
Which came out in the early, that started the whole game.
But you are still writing and you're still publishing books. Tell me about your latest book, please.
Well, the latest book, I think the title says it all. It's called The Mindful Body, Thinking Our Way to Chronic Health. And what people don't understand, it's not just, as we were just saying, I was just saying, that stress is under our control. We don't have to experience stress. The more mindful we are, the less stress we'll experience. It turns out for most of the disorders we experience, there are mindful solutions to it. And our thinking leads to very different health effects than most of us assume. I mean, and I'm not even suggesting, we have data that I told you make people more mindful, they live longer. But let me give you an example. So this work, a lot of the book, but not all of it for sure, is about mind-body unity. I thought, well, mind, body, they're just words. And if you have a mind and a body, then you have to figure out, how do you get from a thought to the body? It doesn't follow naturally. You put them back together. And then it's one thing. Then wherever you're putting the mind, you're necessarily putting the body. So we have lots of, interesting studies testing this. The first one was the counterclockwise study. So we took old men and we had them live in a retreat that we retrofitted to 20 years earlier. And we had them live there as if they were their younger selves. So they would be talking about past events as if they were just unfolding and so on. And in a week, these old men, their hearing improved, their vision, their memory, their strength, and they looked noticeably younger. Now, in the book, I have many, many studies. I'll just, let's see, I don't know if, I'm trying to think if any are particularly relevant to golf, but people can deduce whatever they want. The next study in the series with Ali Crum was we took chambermaids and first asked them, how much exercise do you get? Oh, it is relevant to golf. How much? And they said they don't get any exercise because they thought exercise is what they do after work. Because that's what the Surgeon General says, who sits behind a desk all day. So we simply had them change their minds. We taught them that work was exercise. That's all. Just changing their minds. So working on at the gym, making a bed is like working on this machine at the gym and so on. So now we have 2 groups. One group that realizes their work is exercise, the other group that doesn't. We find the groups are not eating any differently. They're not working any harder. Either group is not expending more effort than the other. However, the group that now sees their work as exercise lost weight. There was a change in body mass index, waist to hip ratio, and their blood pressure came down just by changing their minds. So if you are a golfer, I think that you should pay some attention to all the exercise you're getting rather than assume because you're driving in the cart, there's no exercise. There's still exercise. You can only take the cart so far. And there may be benefits to that. Another study, we have people in a sleep lab and they wake up. We have, without them knowing, changed the clock. So one group thinks they got 2 hours more sleep than they got. One group thinks they got 2 hours fewer than they got, and one group the amount of sleep they got. Turns out, on the measures we took, biological and cognitive function follow perceived amount of sleep. The most recent study with Peter Ungle, we inflict a wound, minor wound, but a wound. And we put people in front of a clock. I'm big on clocks, I guess. And unbeknownst to them, the clock is rigged. So for a third of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For a third of the people, half as fast as real time. For a third of the people, real time. Now, most people would assume that wound is going to heal when that wound heals. What's the difference what the clock says? But it turns out that the clock time, that your perception of how much time has passed actually determines healing time. So many of these sorts of studies that are fun and suggest the amount of control we have over our health is enormous. And in addition to that, we have a part of the book that deals with chronic illness. And most people, when they are diagnosed with a chronic illness, assume their symptoms are going to stay the same or get worse. They assume that there's nothing they can do about it. They feel helpless. Okay, so what we do is we have a treatment for people where basically what you're going to do is we're going to call you periodically and ask you, how is the symptom now? Is it better or worse than the last time? And why? Several things happen now. The first, because you're engaged in this, you don't feel helpless. Second, by us asking you to compare how it is now with before, you're going to recognize that it's not stable. And sometimes you actually feel better. So that then you're going to, in a larger sense, feel better. Third, and most important, is that when we ask you, is it better or worse? We ask you why. And that instigates a mindful search for why. And mindfulness itself is good for your health. And then finally, I believe you're more likely to find a cure if you're looking for it. So to make this simpler, Fred, let's say let's use stress, since we talked about it. You think you're always stressed. Nobody is always anything, okay? Because when you're not stressed, you're not thinking about being stressed, okay? And then you're stressed again, so it seems like this is the way you always. So we call you periodically. And Fred, how are you now? Is it better or worse than before, and why? And we do this over time. It doesn't have to be very long. It's 2 weeks, a week. And then what we find out is, and you're saying, why now are you stressed? You discover you're stressed when you're talking to Ellen Langer. Okay, well, then the cure is easy, right? Stop talking to me or talk to me differently, right? And this has been phenomenally effective. We've got positive results using this attention to symptom variability with people who have Parkinson's, stroke, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, chronic pain, big things that were psychologically under their control. And then, of course, you have the thought part of this, that our thoughts, because mind and body is one, that when we keep ourselves stress-free and we keep ourselves happy, we're healing our bodies. So the book really is about how to tap into all of the control we have over our health and well-being, to which most people are oblivious.
So much to process on this one. I'm just curious if there, again, and I hate using the word pushback, but a lot of what you're talking about seems to go against Western medicine. That if you're not there, then you got to take a pill for it. And you're saying,
yeah. No, I think, I gave a talk a few years ago, about 5 years ago or so, and there were 5,000 people. I thought I was talking to all people who were dealing with cancer. And only afterwards I found out there were lots of physicians in the room. Oh my goodness, because I wasn't paying attention whether I was sounding anti-medical or what have you. But I spoke to many of them afterwards, and, they were very supportive because they know they don't know. And, these are very smart, well-meaning people. I'm not diminishing the effectiveness of medical intervention. What I'm saying is there's still a great deal we can do for ourselves. And even at the least, if we go back to this attention to symptom variability, while you're waiting to find out the results for the biopsy, while you're waiting the 3 weeks to see the doctor, you certainly don't have to sit there being stressed. There are things you can do for yourself. I think that the medical world, and for many of whom in it, I have an enormous respect, but I think that on occasion, maybe more than an occasion, not infrequently, they say things that they shouldn't say. They might tell you have 6 months to live. There's no way they can know this. Right. See, a piece of all of this that helps people understand the uncertainty that should be part and parcel of their existence in some sense is science doesn't give us absolutes. Science gives us probabilities that say if we were to study this again in the same way, we're likely to still get an effect where most people respond in a particular way. Not everybody. Okay, so let me go back a half a step. So I was a straight A student. I was the one you hated. Okay. And I was at this horse event, and this man asked me, can I watch his horse? Because he wants to get his horse a hot dog. Horses don't eat meat, right? I say, sure. He came back with the hot dog, and the horse ate it. And that's when I realized everything I thought I know could be wrong. You can't do an experiment that's going to prove horses don't eat meat, because you're only going to be able to use so many horses, so much meat mixed with so much grain. That can vary. How hungry the horse is, how big all of this will determine. And so what you end up getting in such a study is most of the horses like this, being fed in this way, don't eat meat. That's very complicated. So it's just easier to say horses don't eat meat. It's like 1 and 1 is 2.
Yeah, right.
That what we're taught is an easy way of giving us science most of the time. But I think that we would be better off if we were told most horses don't eat meat, or it seems that horses don't eat meat, or 1 and 1 could be 2, rather than is. As soon as we have the is, we mindlessly accept it as true. We don't pay any attention to the times that it's not true.
It confirms the story for me of when a time I was at a ball game with my friend, and I said, I'm going to go get something to eat. Do you want anything? He goes, yeah, get me a hot dog. And I said, wait, I thought you were a vegetarian. He goes, there's no meat in hot dogs.
Good.
Let's go back to off the course, on the course, and what we can do.
Okay, well, it should be reasonably clear from all we've said so far. Off the course, if you exploit the power and uncertainty, if you are noticing, if you don't take single answers as the only way to answer whatever the question is, if you deal with all your, you don't allow yourself to become stressed because you're aware events don't cause stress. You yourself are causing the stress by the view you're taking. You do all of this. Then when you're, on the 9th hole, you're as good as you can possibly be at that time. And if you, in being mindful, now are also paying attention to how you feel. The example I gave before, you didn't sleep that well, so your shoulder hurts a little. So you change the way you're standing slightly. You make adjustments to take advantage of who you are right at this moment. So off the course is basically to, if one reads The Mindful Body, they'll have a good sense of how to become more mindful off the course, and then you're on the course, and the mindfulness is the same, but the things you're mindful of vary slightly. Off the course, you're not paying attention to the wind, unless you're asking yourself, should you put on a heavier sweater or a jacket? But on the course, you want to be actively noticing things about the course itself, things about your body itself, ways that you could vary the way you hold the club. The 5-iron was good the last time, but now the 7-iron might be a better choice for you because of whatever things have changed. So, we want to understand that we should be guided by our rules and routines, the way we've done things before, but they shouldn't govern how we do things, because right now is different from yesterday and will be different again tomorrow.
And to me, there is no history in golf. The next shot has nothing to do with what your history is on the course.
It should be that way, but typically not, right?
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot for people that you're in the sand, and how do you get out of that? And why'd you get yourself into that?
Or I can never get out of the sand. Yeah.
Yeah. But to also recognize, you're in the sand. See, is this a tragedy or an inconvenience? It'd be great to be able to get out of the sand more easily. The only way you can get out of the sand more easily is if you get in the sand on occasion, right? So there are opportunities to improve.
Oh, yeah.
But the main thing is that this active noticing is what makes it fun. And even if you were a professional golfer, look, I'm a professional psychologist, and I still do my psychology mindfully. I enjoy it. And if you're not enjoying it, then you're being mindless. And if you're enjoying it, then the outcome will typically be better, but even if not, it doesn't matter that much. So to do it tense and follow all those rules that you mindlessly learned, and then screw up, God, it's terrible. But if you're enjoying yourself, and you screw up, at least you had a good day.
And I've always felt like when I walk up to, if this ball goes in the sand, when I walk up to it with the attitude of, oh, I love this shot. This is so much. I always seem to have a better result.
Yeah. Well, I think that people, should pay attention to what we said, where if you did get that hole in one, every time you swung the club, there'd be no game there. So that means that the shots that are harder provide an opportunity to learn something, and also to test yourself. I mean, it's important for people to come to learn that they should take what they do seriously, but not take themselves so seriously. And you have these duffers who hit a bad shot and then they're destroyed by it. Why? I mean, it's kind of crazy. Why expect perfection?
Right, because it doesn't exist, especially in golf and everywhere else.
Right.
Perfection does not exist. Well, again, the new book is called The Mindful Body by Dr. Ellen Langer, and this has been so enlightening and so worthy of golf content. Whether you believe it or not, I firmly do, and I just think this was phenomenal. I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you, Fred. It was fun.
Happy New Year. Hope you're doing well this winter, staying warm and healthy. It's been a few weeks since I've spoken to you, and I'd love your feedback on whether you prefer these little updates or would rather I just end the episode after the interview. Now, the reason I'm checking in today, and I'll probably do that occasionally, is because I'm very proud to announce that golfsmarter.com has been completely rebuilt and is ready for your visit. It's pretty intuitive how to navigate the site, but there are a couple of new elements that hopefully make receiving a free gift, engaging with me and the podcast, much, much easier. When you go to golfsmarter.com, the first thing you'll notice is that everything is focused on our podcast episodes. New conversations each Tuesday and replay from our archives every Friday. That doesn't change. You can listen to the latest or search for a specific topic or guest right from the site on any device you'd like. We also provide a generous selection of platforms and apps suggesting where you can listen, subscribe, and follow us. But there are a couple unique features that I want to make sure you're aware of. Of course, we still have a page dedicated to Tony Manzoni that includes many links to articles, his book, and video. And again, by popular demand, as we do each year since he passed away in 2018, we'll replay all the episodes we did featuring Tony each Friday starting March 7th of this year. So here are the new elements that I'm so excited about. First, if you'd like to leave a review or rate the show, that can all be done without leaving our site. When you rate the show, your comments will go either to Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's your choice. Next, if you'd like to be a Golf Smarter ambassador and receive 3 free gifts for recording an episode opening like Dennis did from Melbourne, Australia at the beginning of this episode, now there's a little tab on the right side of the page that says, on every page, that says, record your show open here. Once you click it, it'll provide you with a simple script on exactly what to say. Hi, my name is, I'm from, and I play at my favorite course. This is Golf Smarter. That's all you need to say. And you can record it on your computer, your tablet, or your phone. And your phone will probably sound the best. Now, it's not recording a telephone signal. It's recording a really clean, nice, audible signal that we'll get to hear. I'm not requiring that people say what episode number it is anymore. It got too complicated, and I'll just fill it in. I'll put that in. Don't worry about that. Next, if you're a golf instructor, a golf entrepreneur, or maybe have a golf-specific topic or story that you'd like to share with our global audience of golf nerds, just click on Be a Featured Guest and fill out the form. Lastly, and hopefully the main reason you'll check out our new site immediately, is that we're now requesting that you fill out a short survey. More than anything, this will let me know who you are, what you think about the show, and what you'd like to learn more of, or even less of, from our featured guests. And once you fill it out, you're going to receive a free link to Tony Manzoni's video. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, just